Hey guys, Luna here, and welcome back to our life. Let's just continue on, shall we, with the groom's arrival. You peeked at the photographs from the shopping spree, so you know what to expect, but there was always something different about seeing it in person. When Scott and June entered the building, the crowd parted, forming a corridor to let them pass. They would be leading the way back up to the hall from there. The crowd was shepherded into the elevator in stages, heading back up top. Baxter stayed hard at work directing the incoming traffic, ensuring that everyone promptly found a seat. You and Cove had arrived early and snagged a row of 4 somewhere near the front. Terry and Miranda appeared afterwards and took the 2 spares. Soon the elevator doors closed for the last time, and the final few stragglers eased into place. The betrothal were behind everyone, waiting patiently. All at once, like everyone could sense it, a hush fell over the crowd. Peering over your shoulders, you saw Baxter gave a curt nod to the officiant before fiddling with a miniature remote. From hidden speakers, you heard the opening bars of music you couldn't place, something measured yet upbeat, and every head in the room swiveled to watch Scott and Jude walk down the aisle. I was expecting a more obvious change in music, but they were bound for an elegant archway that had been erected right beside one of the enormous windows. As they drew nearer to it, the afternoon sunshine haloed them with gold. The music fell silent, all was still. The last 5 days of your lives have been a whirlwind, long, stressful journey toward this singular moment. You gazed at the joyous faces of the 2 men in front of you, and saw none of that. Here at last was the magic to the ritual. They were 2 figures, radiant, bathed in sunlight. They stood hand in hand with the whole world beneath them and had eyes only for each other. The ceremony itself was brief, with no unnecessary pomp and circumstance, but sufficed throughout with sweetness. The officiant gave them a welcome before proceeding with opening words on the subject of commitment, of family, and of love. The exchanges of vows and rings immediately followed, promises to be there for one another in good times and bad. Scott went first, reading his vows from a little card. Jude did this from memory, his voice trembling with emotion. You tried to focus on every word, but became a little distracted by your friends. 2 seats down from you, Miranda was wordlessly dealing out Kleenex to both Terry and Cove, who, on cue, began to weep. She then dabbled at her own face, teary-eyed herself. Thereafter came the candle-lighting ceremony, a moment of quiet intimacy, save for the odd sniffle. The grooms lit their own smaller tapers separately before igniting the large unity candle together. One by one, you watched as their hopes for the day were realized. Baxter had been right. The whole thing went off without so much of a hitch. Well, besides the people getting hitched, of course. It went so smoothly, in fact, that it was nearly over in no time at all. There was one final matter to take care of. With a broad smile and booming voice, the officiant pronounced the marriage complete. You may now? Oh, there wasn't any point in finishing. The crowd erupted in cheers before they could get that far. Scott's restraint had held right up until that final moment, but being forced to wait any longer to kiss his husband was a bridge too far. He jumped the gun, and Jude, but it wasn't like it mattered. The hall filled with the sounds of laughter, and a huge clattering went up as the whole congregation got noisily to their feet. The newly wedded Mr. and Mr. Adam turned to face the crowd of their families and friends. Bright-eyed and heads held up high, they soon stood and waved before linking arms and straying back up the aisle. They shook hands and smiled, and with all sundry leading a growing procession over to the far end of the hall, where the reception tables were laid out waiting. Just like that, the ceremony was over, and it was time to start the party. As the guests began to migrate, the staff hung back, already beginning to arrange the open space. Chairs were being stacked and wheeled over to the reception area, ready for dinner.
Take care.
Go ahead, enjoy yourself. I'll take care of things here. Baxter excused himself to assist with the preparation, disappearing into the crowd and leaving you, Miranda, Cove, and Terry to mingle with the other guests. No sooner had you lost sight of him than you spotted the men of the hour weeding through the mass of guests, hands clasped triumphantly between them. Their progress was rather slow. Everyone and their mom wanted a handshake. Eventually, they made it over to where your little group was standing. Scott was bounding on the balls of his feet, lighter than air. Jude was his usual grounded self, but you could tell he was ecstatic. He raised a casual wave. Yo. Hey guys. He beamed at the pair of them. Your happiness was mirrored on Scott's face. He was smiling at everyone with all his teeth. Now that wasn't so bad, huh, Jude? Jude laughed wholeheartedly at your worry question, the sun breaking through the clouds in his calm exterior for a moment. I had worse times. This earned some hearty chuckles from your friends and some theatrical scorn from Scott's. Today has been incredible. I don't want it to end. It's not done yet? Jude, with one arm still entwined with Scott, reached over with his free hand and tapped you on the shoulder. Hey, this wouldn't have been the same.
I appreciate this.
You can say that again. Thank you so much for your help, Luna. Take some time to relax and enjoy the reception, okay?
You earned it.
Hey, it was worth it. Anything for a good party, right? The pair of them grinned in unison before once more being swept up in the tide of well wishes and distant relations. For an instant, you were left twiddling your thumbs along the others. It took a moment to survey your surroundings for lack of anything better to do. In a far corner of the room, you spotted a conspicuous figure flitting about, a grim-faced lady holding a camera. You recognized her easily. She'd been at every single Eckhart family event for the last decade or more, dutifully documenting for the event for prosperity. You would have put more money on her having been there when Miranda and Jude were born, in fact. It was hard to imagine her missing any significant occasion. Relieved she could make it. Eventually, Scott and Jude had hugged, kissed, or shaken hands with a majority of their guests. Meanwhile, the staff were beginning to clear out a large empty space in the middle of the room, easing the crowd to the walls to uncover the central floor. With cautious steps, Scott and Jude made their way onto the dance floor, two lone figures. They took their position as the noise of the guests faded to silence. We saw Jude leaning close to his husband, whispering something in his ear. Scott grinned, their eyes met, and the music played. It started off slow, with a measured, even tempo. The couple began to move in unison, easing into the dance carefully, the toes testing the floor as one might in the surface of a frozen pond. As the beat began to pick up, though, they quickly settled into a polished practice routine. To your left, Terry sucked in an impressed gasp. He wasn't the only one to get his approval. As the couple spun steadily around the space, there were encouraging whoops and spattering of applause. You could hardly believe they were the same people who, only a few days prior, would have sworn on their lives that this was an impossible feat. And now they were taking turns tipping each other to cheers, barely able to contain their joy. From across the room, you noticed Baxter watching with a gentle heartbeat expression on his face. You detected a hint of satisfaction. He was unabashedly proud of his students. You thought his eyes flickered aside to meet yours, although that might have been a trick of the light, the setting sun casting strange shadows. Either way, his features remained unaltered, tender. As the music came to a delicate finish, Scott and June maintained their final pose for a second or two before embracing, to more acclaim from the onlookers. Scott held Jude's head in both hands, leaning in for a kiss. Extra cheering from Terry. Cove averted his eyes a little bashfully. He's always been the type to get flushed over PTA. The lovebirds took their bows and then rushed off to take more photos. Now that was their first dance was taken care of. The next order of misses was arguably the most important. Food! Terry's voice was easily audible over the growing din of guests milling about once more. In the instant he was gone, vanished in the direction of appetizers. There was a green blur at the edge of your peripheral vision. You looked over to find Cove, or rather, the empty spot where he had been standing mere moments ago. Nothing more reliable than Cove's response to what Miranda had once dubbed the F-bomb. The boy must have hollow legs. Maybe that was what made him so buoyant. You exchanged amused glances with Randy before she shrugged and followed along behind the two boys. Wanting to avoid the rest of the crowd, you waited to find somewhere to sit down. Since you'd be shortly be taking your places for dinner, you decided it was worth finding your designated seat in advance. You wandered over to find the dining area, eyes peeled for your own name or that of someone who might be put near you. In order to indicate the seating arrangement, everyone's names had to be written in calligraphy on little cards with flowing gold ink and placed in a special card holder in front of their chairs. Scott had a lovely vision, and fortunately, it wasn't that hard to find the right seats. Your four-person group was positioned close to the long table where the grooms, their parents, and officiant would sit facing the guests. Yeah, so there's the long table. I'm guessing our table will be right here. You had been placed with Cove on your right-hand side and Miranda and Terry seated to your left. You pulled the chair out from your space and made yourself comfortable, resting your elbows on the table and your chin in your hand, while you idly watch people drift around the room. As they looked at the faces of the guests in all their color and variation, it struck you as this was another aspect of the magic of events like these. Scott and Jude's wedding, their demonstration of their love for each other, had collected and aggregated a web of human connection that touched everyone in the room. And of course, those connections reached to others beyond this place and time. Their future family, their predecessors, their family and co-workers. Peeking out the face of certain gentlemen in the crowd, you were reminded that this wedding was already changed your life irreversibly, and reforged a connection you thought eroded. Some sprinkling of minutes went by while you were lost in your ruminations, and until they came in the scrap of chairs on the polished floor.
Hey!
Hey Luna, thanks for finding our seats. You lifted your head to see Cove, still in the process of sitting down. On the other side, Terry and Miranda were doing the same. All about the dining room, guests were finding their places. Once a momentary fuss of the seating arrangements was dispensed with, the meal followed along in a very short order. A small squadron of waitstaff had begun to set up large plates in front of the guests, each laden with food given a buffet whisper scene. If memory served, the options were a chicken tangerine, beefsteak, vegetarian ravioli, and vegan risotto. Oh, God, oh, sound good. Well, honestly, vegetarian ravioli and vegan risotto, very delicious. I don't know what a chicken tangine is, but it sounds interesting. In actuality, you had paid very little attention to the main course, your mind being elsewhere. The main was naturally a precursor to what Cove would have described as the most important question of all, desserts. On this occasion, you had to agree with him. You wolfed down your meal with a sense of growing excitement, hardly able to stop yourself from peeking over the top table every now and again. The tiered wedding cake, a Xavier's masterpiece, stood splendid at one end of Jude and Scott's table, and next to it, hidden under an unassuming silver coche. How well would it be received? What would Scott think? In your anticipation, you were finding it hard to sit still. It didn't escape Cove's notice that something was up. Halfway through eating, there was a gentle nudge at your elbow. He was looking at you quizzically.
Are you okay?
Is everything okay? He was generally concerned, which was both very sweet and rather funny. You flashed him a quick smile and waved it away, not wanting to risk being overheard. During the ceremony and throughout the meal, Baxter had flitted from corner to corner of the room with the delicacy of a honeybee, his presence unassuming and unnoticed by all present except you. As the main course was being cleared, however, he tapped a fork against the side of a wineglass, the clear sound of reverberation off the tile floors and quieting of dinner's discussions. Honored guests, I hope the food and drink has been to your satisfaction. There were some non-specific noises of concurrence from the various tables. He glanced at Terry, who was patting his stomach contentedly, then at Miranda, still nibbling away at a piece of bread.
Glad to hear it.
Glad to hear that. We've come to the part of the evening where the newlyweds will cut the traditional first slices of their wedding cake. Scott, Jude, if you'd like to. The sound of the two chairs scraping against the floor drowned out the rest of what he said. Scott and Jude got to their feet and came around from behind the top table. The two men stood shoulder to shoulder in front of the tiered cake, a large steel knife clutched in Scott's right hand. Jude left rested over the top, his wedding band winking in the candlelights. There was a momentary pause as the door-faced photographer performed her solemn, at least to her duty, and then relatively little actual ceremony. The first clean cuts were made. The couple apportioned its light apiece, and as promised, there was no smushing cake into anyone's face. A round of applause rippled around the tables as the first bites were taken, then a bustling sound as people started getting up to form a queue. Scott was lumbering up to carve a slice for everybody when Jude tugged at his sleeve and stopping him with a word. He gestured over to the silver cover, still hiding whatever was underneath. Sensing that there was more to come, the guests piped on again. When Scott reached over and finally lifted off the top to reveal the groom's cake in all its glory, there were several soft gasps. One of these was from Scott himself, whose face was blown wide with surprise and delight. He smiled open-mouthed, looking suddenly to his husband and back down at the controller cake. Oh, that is adorable! I'm glad we were able to actually see it. You felt a warm, fuzzy feeling spread throughout your body as Scott began to whisper rapidly in Jude's ears, likely interrogating him about what this was going on and where the cake had come from. It was far too away for what to tell what he was said, but you didn't need to be in earshot to know Scott was floored. You sagged in your seat with relief, your long night's effort vindicated. News of the groom cake spread like a wave throughout the room, people murmuring excitedly to one another, with some approving nods and expressions of admiration thrown in. At his husband's side, Jude was looking nowhere but at Scott's face, eyes filled with emotion. He wrapped an arm around Scott's waist, and they leaned into each other into a sidelong embrace. A fresh night had been provided for the second cake, and Scott eagerly called the photographer back over to snap some fresh shots, both of the whole cake and then them cutting it. At this time, as decision made, Jude addressed it on.
Seriously?
This is the last cake, I swear. Some laughter, and then the room devolved into chatter as people began lining up to the front of the top table for their desserts. You and your friends, being close by, got up there early. The couple were handing out slices to everyone on little side plates. Jude took care of the tiered cake while Scott was still fawning over the bright red controller, even as he cut into it. At the front of the line, you had the option of taking a slice from the chocolate vanilla tiered cake, the carrot cake of your own making, or to Cove's delight, a piece of both. You went for the tiered cake. I'm not a fan of carrot cake. That's what I'm having too. Doesn't it look so good? I know the decorations don't have anything to do with how it tastes, but I feel like it does. Then she stammered apologetically, flushing a little. I mean, that's not to say that your cake doesn't look nice too. You can tell a lot of hard work went into it, and Scott and Judge were both so happy with how it turned out. It was really kind of you to do that for them. Thank you. I just like hot chocolate cake. Exactly. I'm a fan of chocolate cake. It's okay, Randy. I like this one too. When everyone was in their seats again, you had an unexpected visitor. Baxter had squeezed his way past the line of desserts and over to your table. His hand hovered around the back of your chair. Sup? Hi. Hey. Cove's greeting was still stilted and awkward. There simply hadn't been time before him to get used to Baxter's presence, and he was never quite used to it to begin.
Hello.
It has been a while, Cove. Good evening, everyone. How are we enjoying ourselves? Your group exchanged glances amongst themselves, and as if to decide who would go first. Ish, nice. Cove swallowed his mouthful of cake and tried again.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's been pretty nice, yeah. Miranda threw up her hands in a mock expiration, her body language having become a lot more flamboyant ever since the wine she had with the main course. Don't worry, Baxter. I think it's the best wedding I've been to. Terry nodded along as she spoke, tilting his chair up on his hind legs with his arm draped over the back of it. It's amazing. You brought your A game today, B-Man. Baxter's eyes twinkled at the mention of his own moniker, and it looked like the professional here was suppressing a laugh to boot. I'm afraid that joke gets a C-, Terry. Hey, no, but seriously, man, it's been a blast. And that's what, 2 successful events you've organized for Miranda's family already? You should become the official party planner for their records.
Yeah.
That could work. At least I know who to come to when Terry and I, need help. Exactly. Wait a minute. The front of Terry's chair hit the floor with a thunk. Samara waited for her boyfriend's brain to catch up with the conversation, and she reached for a glass and took another swig of wine. Terry looked like he was trying to solve an extremely difficult mental math problem, all power of language having evaporated. Miranda simply patted his leg, looked him in the eyes, and smiled sweetly. You let out a silent shout in your head, not wanting to interrupt whatever moment the two were now having. Miranda had proposed at her brother's wedding, but it was a heck of a hint. Baxter put a finger thoughtfully to his lips, fighting a way to hide the corner of his mouth curling upward. Perhaps I can consider introducing a loyalty card system. I certainly appreciate a returning customer. Miranda had now laced her fingers together with Terry's, who was still unresponsive to external stimuli. Cove giggled and leaned in to speak quietly to him. I wasn't here for a week. What happened? Honestly, a lot. You didn't get a chance to elaborate. Baxter, Luna, I was looking for you. I know what you did. Scott had a healthy flush to his face, his eyes bright and enthusiastic. It didn't match the almost sinister choice of words. Jude appeared at his husband's right elbow. You made the cake?
Yep.
Yep, last night. Scott's eyebrows and hushed voice rose in unison, his tone modulating a few octaves upward in incredulousness.
What?
Last night? You can't be serious. What were you thinking? You and Baxter nearly fell over each other trying to assure Scott that there hadn't been too much trouble, that you volunteered your time, and besides, you were both old hands at baking by now. Out of the corner of your eye, you noticed Cove paying attention, a look of comprehension dawning on his face. The source of your earlier agitation had finally been revealed. With enough reassurance from the pair of you, Scott's concerns was mollified enough for him to round his way back to thanking you again. It was the highlight of the day, honestly.
That's wonderful.
You're too kind, Scott. It's been more than worthwhile. As long as you're satisfied, I can be happier. Anything for our special boys. Thanks. It was just perfect. The cake, the ceremony. His voice was getting strained with emotion. He broke off in favor of taking Jude's hands again. We won't forget it, right, Grant? A vigorous shake of the head from Grant. Cool. Well, here Jude reached over and clasped a hand on Baxter's shoulder.
We owe you.
For real. You made this happen. Thank you. Thank you all. There was another round of your welcomes and don't mention it before Baxter made his excuses and promptly vanished. Jude watched him leave, arms folded.
No clue.
I don't get it, that dude. He's a head full of dealing with stuff. He handled me and Scott's issues. Why can't he do it for himself? You, Cove, Miranda, and Terry all swapped a series of sidelong looks for only having known Baxter a week. Jude's perception was uncannily accurate. What could he even say in rebuttal? Jude didn't pay you any mind, nor did he retract his statement. He merely shrugged with one shoulder, the fingers of his hands splayed out in a universal, well, whatever, kind of gesture. You sighed long and deep. Sounds about right. Jude gave his wedding reception a glance with new eyes. We should go. The real dancing's starting, and he owes me a rematch. Scott uttered, cocking his hips. It's not gonna make any difference, Jude, but I'll humor you since it's your wedding day. It's your wedding day, too. These two made a game, a competition, one at that, even out of dancing together. No one could get in the way of that. The couple joyously made a break for the dance floor hand in hand. After a second or so, Miranda wiped a few chocolate crumbs from around her mouth and got to her feet, holding a hand out to Terry.
So...
You know, we could dance too? Terry placed a palm on top of Miranda's and sprang out of his seat. Yeah, let's show those clans about what 10 years of birthday parties look like. About you, Cove? The pair of them turned their puppy dog's eyes over to Cove, who was somehow chewing. He shook his head and swallowed.
Don't worry about it.
I'm good. I'll stay and watch if that's okay. Sure. Lena? You nodded, getting up to join them. Dancing seems like fun. He waved goodbye to Cove and ran up to the center of space. A large number of Scott and Jude's friends and relations were already there, shaking enthusiastically. It felt like a shook in your blood like a buzz, the music becoming a pulse that merged with the beat of your hearts. It had been much more intense and energetic than the groom's initial two-step had been. The ballroom had swiftly left behind for what was essentially a miniature disco. Scott and Jude bounced their way over to the three of you. They laughed incredulously as Terry and Randy busted not merely one, but several moves. Other dancers stopped to whistle to cheer them on. The fox competition was soon forgotten about, while Terry and Miranda started doing slightly tipsy laps at the dance floor together. You stayed behind and hopped around with Scott and Jude. You couldn't help but spare a thought to whoever was organizing the music, as the final triumphant chorus of a punk band ballad blended into the opening bars of a hip-hop track. However, the music obviously had known their audience. You hadn't heard some of this music in years. Midway through, Randy and her brother-in-law doing an impromptu rendition of Macarena glanced over to where Cove was sitting. He gave a cheerful little wave, perfectly content to stay where he was. In the glass palace on the top of the world, the people celebrated the evening away. A few early stars, like curious children, began to poke their heads out. This time moved for you in strange increments, moments and colors running together like globs of paint. You counted the minutes by the measured of jazz chords and camera flashes and laughter. You remembered looking around at him at times, trying to catch a glimpse through the shifting masses of bodies, eyes peeled for that telltale mop of grayish black. But try as he did, Baxter Wood was visible only in short snatches. The back of his head over someone's shoulder, half a face turned to speak to a colleague, a pair of eyes reflection in a window. His presence was like a wisp in insubstantial smoke. He had become a shadow, easily forgotten yet always there. Hours passed until we were standing in the lobby with the others to send the couple off. It was funny, you thought, for the days of effort he put in was all over so quickly. Scott and Jude were doing the rounds one last time, expressing their heartfelt appreciation to the people coming. They hadn't stopped holding hands since the dancing begun. A few moments later, and you were waving from the footsteps as they got in the sparkling Cove car and drove off. The splash of red sped away in an instant, carrying them in a new life together. The majority of guests made themselves scarce shortly after, heading downtown to the parking garage, on buses, or getting into taxis. You stayed behind with Scott and Jude's relations. The party portion of the party might have been finished, but someone had to clean up afterwards. You leaned against the wall of the elevator on the way back up to the hall, half tired, half relieved. One good thing about the event being over was that you didn't have to worry about it anymore. The doors opened once again, and you stepped outside into the wedding hall. Cove, Miranda, and Terry were at the dining tables, busily stripping them down. Hey! Hey, over here! You were beckoned to join them, and the seniors were scoping up garbage and folding tablecloths in earnest. It was almost cliche at this point, but you once found yourself recalling a similar occasion. Years before, as like when you stayed behind to clean up Miranda's birthday party. It felt the same way then, the strange mix of emptiness and satisfaction. Casting your eyes around the room, you realized that there wasn't only a common thread. Like before, there was one member of your ragtag group who wasn't present. Baxter was down on the opposite end of the room, still rushing to and fro between various groups of staff, keeping himself occupied. You decided not to get in his way, not while he was busy. The moment would come eventually. The wedding might be over, but you still wanted to dance. Resigned yourself to waiting. The trouble was, it took a lot longer than you anticipated. Once all the trash had been cleared away, you had started vacuuming all the floors. How did he find that? And when he finished with the decorations, he was in the middle of moving stacks of chairs over to the elevators. He passed close by you as he began to pack the wedding cakes. You called out to him, but all that you got was a perfectly smile and a tilt of the head before you sped away again. Your heart sank as you turned back to what was left of the groom's cake, which were slicing back into a storage container. You couldn't ignore Baxter, but the same clearly wasn't true for him. He hadn't spoken to you since that one time at the reception. It couldn't be a coincidence. For some reason or another, he'd been avoiding all of you, or maybe you specifically. It was getting kind of ridiculous. There was almost nobody left in the room. By now it was you, Cove, Miranda, Terry, and some employees from the building itself, and Baxter. Everyone else had gone. Time was running out. If you left before you got a chance to speak, there was no way of knowing whenever you would get another. You might never see him again. You looked down at the cake that you made, the last evidence of the collaboration, maybe even your friendship, and you were cutting it into pieces and putting away in a box. How symbolic. You carried on slicing, ruminating on this thought in silence. It was hard to say how you felt about it. Sure, you accepted that this sort of behavior was in the past, but now... Ache a break? The sound of Miranda's voice pulled you out of your mental quagmire. You'd been so focused on Baxter's usual strangeness that you had registered her talking. One look at the surprise on her face was enough for Randy to know you'd been a million miles away. She tapped the table in front of you. I can finish up here, Luna. You've been going at it for ages, and you were all up last night, too. Her wide eyes were worried when you looked up to them, and there was a slight pinch in her forehead. Yeah, you should take it easy. Terry's head popped into view from behind Miranda, his expression of concern an exact replica of hers. It was so cute, the way they had gradually taken on each other's mannerisms over the years. Yeah, leave something for Cove to do for once. He's got to earn that 5th slice of the cake. There's a yelp of indignation at last, but not least, Cove made up his appearance over Terry's shoulder. The sight of the three of them lined up in the height order like it was that comical. Cove's face was a little pouty, his tone defensive. It wasn't like I didn't want to help out Terry, and besides, it wouldn't be my fifth, it would be, let's see. He trailed off, his gaze drifting up to one more side as he silently counted down his fingers. As a unit, Terry and Miranda rolled their eyes. Seeming to realize his mistake, Cove dropped his hands. Anyways, bad break, Luna. You can leave the rest to me, okay? Well, at this, Miranda pulled up a chair next to you and sat down.
Wow.
Leave it all to you, Cove? That's so nice. Huh? Well, thanks for offering, buddy. It's been such a long day, after all. Terry stretched wide and made a ridiculously exaggerated yawning sound before plopping down onto Miranda's lap and putting an arm around her shoulder. They both grinned at Cove with all their teeth.
Hey!
I didn't mean that. Stifling a laugh, he got up to leave. Your friends are probably right. You need to give their wedding work a rest. You had other things on your mind anyways. He patted Cove sympathetically on the shoulder as you headed for the far end of the wedding hall in the direction of a certain someone. For the past half hour or so, Baxter had visibly struggled to stay preoccupied. Almost nobody remained for him to give instructions to. There were moments with chairs to stack or tables to clear, but now he's resorted to standing with his back turned and his arms folded, gazing over the city through the enormous window and trying his best to look deep in thought. Going forward, though, it was about the time you put him out of his misery. You approached him from behind and softly called out his name. Baxter? He stiffened at the sound, shoulders tensing. For a few seconds he was frozen, and then all at once Baxter spun around to face you, that preneurial smile fixed firmly in place. Good evening again, Luna. Is everything alright with the cleanup? Yep, not my problem anymore. I see. It's good everything is in hand with respect to the tidying up. You've been a great help. That didn't bode well. Baxter was as mimical as ever, but his body language was closed off. His tone, light in the way you learned long ago, was his way of establishing a sense of distance. You inched a little closer, expressing your intent to stay right where you were. This conversation wasn't over with pleasantries. The slight hunch returned to his shoulders. Well, since I have you for a minute, I wanted to mention it earlier, but there wasn't a convenient moment.
Lovely.
Your outfit, it looks so lovely, Luna. Your sense of style is very tasteful. You truly are a showstopper to yourself. Though I guess it shouldn't be a surprise at this point. It was true years ago, and even more so now. He was talking quickly. His eyes never seemed to be settled in one place for long. In spite of all the compliments, he found that it was all washed over you without making much of an impression. More than anything, you were disappointed. Baxter was deflecting, and you were doing so in the only way he knew how. It might have been funny to you once. I won't keep you any longer. I'm sure you appreciate a chance to relax after this tiring week. Before you could react, he was stepping away from the window. In an instant, he was in line with you, and another he had passed. You knew how this whole song and dance went. He led you through it once before. You tried your hardest. Why does this remind me of Slay the Spire at the end? Thus, when we go back up to meet the final thing. You tried your hardest, but it wasn't Baxter who wasn't willing to meet you halfway, then there was nothing to be done. He decided to walk at you again, step by measured step, and then you heard a long, drawn-out exhale. Baxter had stopped after a few paces, his back toward you. You saw a hand come up to pinch the bridge of his nose. Baxter turned slightly, glancing over his shoulder so his gaze met yours. You didn't say anything. You didn't dare to. Like he was a wild animal, at a risk of being spooked. He closed his eyes for a few seconds and breathed in and out. You blinked, and then he was coming back in your direction. His face set in a determined expression. He stopped a few feet from where you stood, the heels of his dress shoes snapping together.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Luna. You must think I avoided you deliberately. You made a kind of hybrid shrugging, nodding gesture to indicate that. Yeah, you'd gotten that feeling. It was hard to miss. He made a noise that was one part laugh, another part sigh. Of course I am. My hope was that you wouldn't notice. What you don't know won't hurt you and all that. Why would you think I wouldn't notice? I don't know. Wishful thinking? You always notice more about me than is convenient. And since the plan is dashed, I wouldn't want you to get the wrong impression about why. It isn't your fault, and I haven't forgotten everything that happened last night. It's only a highly specific situation that has reawakened my reticence, you might say. What about it? Baxter silently stared over the expanse of the city for a while as if collecting his thoughts. Then he finally spoke to you, really spoke to you, as two people who knew each other with no pretenses in between. It's been hard not to feel nostalgic this past week. We've had quite a stroll down memory lane, sometimes by happenstance, sometimes because I went out my way to do so. I have fond memories of those days in Sunset Bird, treasured memories. Like most treasures, there are things to be taken out and admired from time to time and then put away again. Though some are too delicate even for that, they should never be touched. He was talking mostly to his shoes, his hands stuck into his pockets, an uncharacteristically timid gesture.
Yes.
This evening is a reprise of something I never wished to relive. His voice was soft, plaintive, there was an ache in it. That party was wonderful, the summer soiree. Oh, he remembered it too. It's been a long time since I've known what it was like to be included, to be around people who refuse to let you be out of it, no matter how hard you try and weasel out of it. Terry, Miranda, and Cove were too kind, but it was your dresser specifically that are at the heart of this matter. He laughed, a nervous, grasping thing, and pressed a hand instinctively to his chest.
Truthfully.
Here's the truth. If you didn't ask me to dance again in this after hours of another event we helped create like you did then, it would have broken my heart. That would mean definitely that I lost what we had. Baxter's tone shook. His hand dropped to his side where it balled into a fist, the air around you very still. But if you did ask, it would be more painful because that would mean... Baxter struggled to put his deepest feelings to words. The first attempt died off, but he squared his shoulders, forcing himself to get it out. It would mean even after everything, you hadn't let me go, that you accepted me still, that you always would have, and I should have believed that all along, that the only thing I could have done was hurt you and myself of my own accord. There's a pain of his words that shook you to hear, though by now you would never have made this mistake of thinking he lacked emotions. Baxter so rarely displayed this kind of naked vulnerability. Baxter tucked his face away from you. It's horrible. I didn't want to know one way or the other.
I'm sorry.
I'm fairly pathetic, you understand. That matter was the core of it. Baxter couldn't let himself be happy no matter what. He was scared to hope and too ashamed of himself to try. So, is it too late to ask for that dance? There's no music. The response came out of nothing more than a defeated whisper. There was a faint sheen to his eyes, and yet Baxter raised his left hand with the palm turned up in a familiar gesture. You cautiously placed your hand on top of his. His fingers were cooler to the touch than you expected. Slowly, with gentle care, you began to lead Baxter into a dance. It was hardly a brilliant display of artistry, more sophisticated way than anything else. You traced out the sides of a square, lifting in time to an imaginary beat. His shoes clicked against the empty dance floor, the only sound to be heard besides the omnipresent whispers of the air conditioner. You didn't say anything more. Your mind was lost in a memory. That, and the sensation of proximity. It was easy to forget how intense of the fact of being mere inches away from another human being could be, this person in particular. The complex, minute variations in eye shade you only ever noticed up close, a rich brown, warm as earth, and the delicate curl of eyelashes. Baxter adjusted his posture stiffly, and it was only then that you became aware of the fact that he'd been staring even more intently than circumstances had demanded. It would have been worrying not for the rosy tint creeping into his complexion. He wasn't upset by the attention. After a few quiet revolutions, he found more he wanted to tell you. You've always been understanding, Luna, excessively so even. Whenever I'd look back on that summer in Sunset Bird, I'm stunned by the way I prioritized myself above all else, and yet here I am making that same mistake. From the moment you walked into that restaurant, my actions were nothing but self-preservation and damage control, and occasionally reminiscing to the extent that I was pleased with.
Yes.
Yes, I had a professional commitment not to let personal matters impede the work that needed to be done, but my distancing went far beyond that. In the end, I was using their marriage as an excuse. If not for that, there would have been something else, some trivial reason for keeping you at arm's length. That likely doesn't shock you. Yeah, I'd pegged you for Actually, you rolled your eyes and sighed. That was stating the obvious. I should have done better by you, Jude and Scott as well. Bax's eyebrows lifted in the middle, I printed an expression.
To be honest.
But if you can still believe me, I hadn't intended for my baby today to be quite as cruel as it might have come across. Oh yeah? I'm listening. Thank you. In the past, I spent every moment around other people thanking all of the limited span of our acquaintances, as if I wasn't seeing them all only the imminent departure. Arrangements fell in line with that, a clear time frame, limited from the onset, predetermined rules set in stone. It was that way 5 years ago, it was that way now. Would cooperate for a short period in service of Scott and Jude's wedding, and then that'd be that. I said so myself more than once.
But
the problem is, as I only recently realized, he leaned in closer, his voice dripping in volume, letting you in on a secret. I forgot about that. Huh? Seeing the open incredulity on your face, Baxter gave a dry chuckle. You see, I thought completely and earnestly that I didn't need to speak with you now, here, when I was feeling so sensitive. We could simply pick up where we left off later tonight or tomorrow. The fact that we no longer had a reason to interact didn't come up as part of the consideration. What? Then music shift. The entire time you agonized over the idea that after this wedding it would cut you off, and Baxter was already imagining what the two of you might be doing next Tuesday. I know, who would have guessed it was possible to attain a connection with someone, even with no limited set of circumstances to support it. Baxter laughed once, and it was real, and then he returned to utmost seriousness. I'm not simply going to vanish, not again. I apologize for how stressful this was. I apologize for everything I've ever done for you. It's a little hard to approach what I've stowed over the years, so many mistakes. Even now, when I hope to make things right, to make things last, I'm forced to admit that I'm ignoring the reality of the situation. Baxter shook his head ruefully. This doesn't come down to what I did at all. I don't have the right to put myself before you. I never
Forgive
did.
me.
Sorry, I'm rambling. The point is, if this is going to continue the way I've been silently picturing, I can't be shallow company. It was getting harder and harder to listen to Baxter talk about himself this way. Again, you recalled your shared history, an evening spent listening to him pour his hat over your dining room table. You wanted to interject, to contradict him. Regrets are one thing, but maybe he was talking the self-critic a little far. There was one thing that stopped you in your tracks, however, the words sticking in your throats. Right now was Baxter's being utterly sincere. He thought long and hard about this, and so, despite your misgivings, you held your tongue and waited. On that front, there is some of my own advice which I should have followed a long time ago. When the time comes, don't pull away, and you'll only regret it later. Your words were out before you noticed, the scene echoing back in your mind as you said it. Baxter blinked, startled. Then his features softened for the first time since you approached him. Exactly. How apt that was. Though honestly, I can't believe I had the audacity to say such a thing to another person, even if they were a fictional character. Still, in my ignorance, I had a point. My 19-year-old self had a few ideas worth keeping, and he had people he should have held on to as well. Baxter squared his jaw and lifted his chin, drawing himself up and looking at you with full in the face.
I don't want us to separate after today.
So there you have it. I would like to become your friend, or remain your friend today, tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, as long as you want. His heart's desire was made physically manifest by the way he held your hand like he would never let go. No more running away. I'll listen to whatever you have to say to me, even if it's difficult to hear. His mouth pulled into a bashful little sultry smile, his posture open and vulnerable. There was an earnest, almost childlike aura of hope around him. As Baxter patiently waited your response, he mentally scrambled to make sense of how you felt. There was a lightness to everything. Suddenly, your whole body felt tingly. You had done it. Somehow you reconnected with the man you thought you lost for good, and you wanted to be friends? Let's see. You know what? For the mere moments, just because you had to kiss this guy right now. You're entranced by his dark, unwavering eyes. He was there. Baxter was actually right there in front of you. You could feel him, the warmth of his hand radiating in your palm like he gathered the last ember of a fireplace. Your heart squeezed painfully tight. It needed to be smaller to push away into your throat. More than anything else, Baxter had been an ethereal presence in your life. From the very first time he had appeared before you, when you didn't even know it. He was a mysterious stranger on the edge of the dance floor at the summer soiree. It was like a memory that lingered in your mind, skirting between clarity and a dreamlike vision, but never truly forgotten. The boy crystallized in your thoughts for good when the teenager he grew into suddenly appeared on your old neighborhood streets. The summer of 2016 was more than you could have imagined, all because of him. So in this world, it is 2021. In the few months you'd spent together, a delicate relationship had blossomed between you. But during those days, you were unable to grasp how fragile it had actually been, how completely you would decay. There was no holding you on to your suitor for a season. He tore himself away from you like an autumn storm bringing down a sapling. His cycle of being lost and found before letting go continued in an endless loop miles away from you. Life kept going in its own direction for 5 whole years, yet no matter how much it pained you, the affection you nurtured still hadn't died. Not from the downpour or long winter that followed. The roots kept hold deep inside, ready to burst through the surface if the chill ever passed. Seasons were meant to come and go, but there was no guarantee someone would come again for you and him. Your paths had no reason to cross, except they did. Again, you were given a third chance. The young man at a party for a single night, the tourist for one summer, the planner for a wedding, Pax Award. This time, he was reaching out to you. This time he could stay. He changed. What about you? You could hold him if you tried. The man himself in the present was waiting cordially as he sorted through your many thoughts. Cracks of anxiety had formed at the corners of his mouth and the creases of his eyes. The more the silence stretched, the more Baxter slipped into his forced pleasantries. Against his core nature, he had been vulnerable. What you might say in response to that was eating away at him. Baxter was important to you more than he believed. That's what made you pause. Since meeting again, the charm and excitement you felt in your younger years had grown into an irreplaceable love. You reaffirmed the decision. This was your moment, and you would take it. The wedding was over. It was done. You didn't have to hold back for the sake of avoiding complications for Scott and Jude. This is what he'd been waiting on, and you wouldn't wait a minute longer. Besides, he asked you out the first time. It was only fair that you would do the second. You could do it the second go-arounds. Let's see. Carefully, he cradled his cheeks and kissed his forehead. Flushed Baxter. Baxter braced himself for the moment you moved, not out of concern for your intentions, but because he couldn't comprehend what was happening. But he didn't turn away, and you put your whole heart into the gesture. It wasn't the first time you kissed him, though it still felt like a whole new experience. Look at that face. He's adorable. Baxter had gotten a little taller, his shoulders were broader to you, and you knew this meant entirely different than it had when you were teenagers. There's no going back. A beat passed then another. Baxter didn't do anything else than the initial utterance, except look at you with sharp eye incredulousness. It was giving you all the time you needed to come to your senses and pretend that didn't happen. Typical Baxter. But no matter how long he hedged, this wasn't going away. He playfully swept Baxter into another fix. Oh no. The former competitive dancer stumped along. He couldn't quite get his footing while you led him into wide circles across the empty floor. That kiss means I want to be with you, if that wasn't totally obvious. The point was made. You kindly pressured Baxter against his will into saying more than 2 words about it.
I swear.
Forgive me for asking an impolite question, but what could I have possibly have done? Not a hint of his usual wireness or teasing sarcasm colored the words. It was a flat-out request for understanding. In fact, never mind. I know what I have done, and this isn't anything that should lead to this. I treated you terribly. His tone had become icy. Hints of the person Baxter was 5 years ago were resurfacing. The hesitancy to attach too strongly, the disbelief that he had a right to do so. Honestly, you weren't upset or surprised by his instincts response to the romantic overtures. You don't known him too long for that. Did he even realize how long he'd been grasping your hand? It was almost painful. It's because I understand you. You didn't have to do anything other than be who you are. No one else is you, and there's no one else who could replace you. His chest rose and fell shakily. He couldn't look at you any longer and turned his face away. Baxter wasn't willing to say you were wrong or a liar, but neither could he agree with the conclusion. It was a bad idea. You were making a mistake. Those were the thoughts your guest were keeping to himself. A change of approach might be helpful there. You wanted Baxter to embrace the love you had for him, but that didn't have to be the first step. Will you at least let me know what I mean to you? Whether we're together or not? I just want to know that much. Slowly out of the corner of his eyes, Baxter would survey you critically. How inconsiderate, asking me that. You are aware, likely more than anyone else, what a difficult question it is. While he wanted to hold on, Baxter took it as a cue to release his clutch on your hand. Fine, I'll answer both what I feel and what I might do about that. It's only proper after you had gone so much effort. But first, I need to give me a few faces. Go on. Donning an aloof expression, Baxter pulled out a fitted cuff of his formal shirt. I can't stand doing anything in the morning, even if I can pretend to for clients. Neither can I. Baxter's guarded stance quickly quirked briefly, then he continued matter-of-factly. I can't afford elaborate trips these days, and my only remaining social contacts are limited to the wedding industry, not performance, theater, or owners of fancy cars or the like. So, I don't have millionaire buddies either. In that case, your commitment changed his demeanor for the worse. Sosa gave way to despondence. He threw his hand into defeat. Luna, I've never been a good partner, even a good friend to anyone in my life. I don't care. No matter how many of these considerations he laid out, it was never going to change how important he was to you. You could reassure him all day, but then a glint of life flickered in his features. Baxter's lips tugged into a hopeful smirk. You should also know, I'm not one for flinging.
Is that fine?
Are you entirely positive you want to go down this route with me? It might not be as fun or as easy or as short as you're picturing. I still want you. It's your turn, Baxter. Full of determination, he repeated the question he promised to face. Do you want this to happen? Do you care for me? Baxter watched you silently, carefully noting each and every line in your expression and bend in your stance. It was nothing if attuned to the finer details. Then, with a flick of his wrist, you had your answer. In a word, yes. Wait, did he agree just like that? As soon as he questioned it, in the instant you were taken aback. Baxter grinned wolfishly. Baxter wasn't pushed onto the back foot any longer.
I love you.
In a few words, absolutely, Mixmare, I'm in love with you. I didn't stop wanting to be with you. Your jaw dropped at the change in tune. It made the muse. Now, I won't belabor my objections on your taste in men. That's not what you want to hear. This comes down to what I think, and that was never actually a question, as I suspect you knew. When I left you 5 years ago, that didn't make me happy. When I kept you at arm's length after meeting again, I was unhappy still. If it doesn't mean to be that way, if I was wrong, then I don't know, honestly. I never considered it as a viable option until moments ago. But I would know what would make me happy in an ideal world.
It's you.
Baxter gave you a bow that was somehow both earnestly deferral and jokingly self-mocking. You knew he was being ridiculous, and you did too. Yet Baxter wouldn't be himself without his flair for the absurd. I certainly hope that this is acceptable. Is there anything else I can help you with today? He raised his hand and kissed the back of it. That was the proper thing for the classy man like Baxter, and dazzling him, it did. He couldn't help but look away as he lips brushed against his pale skin.
So charming.
Adorable. Should I take that as a yes? Yep, I'm far from done.
I can do that.
Duly noted. I can make that work. Sheesh, took you long enough. Baxter slipped into his hand into yours once more to finish the dance started long ago. The two of you were in sync then. Your pace increased in time with one another as you took turns singing around the dance floor that remained all yours. Baxter tilted his head, a humorous thought coming to mind. He was kind enough to share it. Nothing needed to be held back anymore. Where is Cove, Miranda, and Terry? They're gotta be watching this. There's no way they're not watching. Of course, proposing during a wedding is an absolute no-no. Deciding to date after the event has already concluded should avoid the faux pas. Those who wanted Randy to actually get engaged today, I think will be good. Very true. Your romp ended with a grandiose twirl under the golden lights of the setting sun striking right through the ceiling-length windows, an ideal backdrop for your private performance. You tried to catch your breath from, well, everything, but that wasn't an easy task, considering that you were laughing gleefully all the while. Baxter released your hands. He didn't need it since the dance was over, though he found plenty of reasons to keep you close in a gentle embrace.
You're too kind.
Thank you, Luna. You are very kind, to me most especially. His brown eyes were warm and inviting, an autumn beauty that made its way to your summer by luck, or chance, or fate. Always feeling out of place, Baxter kept slipping away. Now that would change. Seeing his face, it was undeniable. He wasn't some stranger there to do a hired gig, or even your old fling you happened to be reunited with. He was particularly improper, distant, and difficult, shameless and smug, and Baxter Ward was... Seems our story has a happy ending after all. That's quite a surprise. Yes, we come a long way. After 5 years apart and a stubborn insistence to maintain that distance on Baxter's part, the two of you could stay together. We're so grateful. How could you ever need anything more? Well, my charming partner, I have a proposition for you. Or maybe not. More might be on the table after all. Ooh, I'm intrigued. Having your rapt attention bolstered his already impressive boldness. If I'm recalling this correctly, now that Jude and Scott are leaving on their honeymoon, you'll be all alone in their home. That sounds fairly dull, not to mention inconvenient.
In that case...
I would be delighted to have you come over to my apartment for the remainder of this trip. You ask me to stay with you? I am. Again, there's no reason to waste time, and I'd be a heartless lover not to even offer. Stunning, you could really never underestimate what Baxter would pull out of his tailored sleeves. Though, if that would be too much I wouldn't be insulted. Staying one night doesn't require you to stay longer. Getting more personal time with Baxter before you had to go, or sitting by yourself in the Adams guest chamber. The decision made itself. Are you kidding? Forget the original plans. That's way better. He was thrilled, and so are you. Everything was positively ideal. Excellent. In that case, it's almost settled. Huh? Almost?
You know...
Yes, it's not finished yet. We are going to have to meet with our audience at some point. Yeah. Our audience, your gaze traveled off to the side in a matching motion to Baxter. Yeah, I had a feeling. Miranda, Terry, and Cove were so crowded around the tables, except rather than getting any work done, they were watching the two of you like it was the latest in the daytime. So, yeah. Realizing they had seen the entire affair, your face grew hotter. So it wasn't exactly a private show. Baxter chuckled. Why would a little thing like having one of the most emotional interactions in life being a public event bother him? Well, it would have been a big problem if things had ended badly. Since it didn't, he was unstoppable. After the momentary distraction that stole your attention away from Baxter was over after a touch, he slipped his fingers in between yours to establish his presence at the affront of your mind once more. Approached the gang hand in hand. They continue to gawk even after you become distinctly aware of the impropriety. When you reach their part of the room, Baxter offered a cordial greeting, inclined his hand along with the words,
Good day.
A marvelous evening to you, friends. Yeah, and they're both surprised.
Huh?
Uh-huh. More awkward silence. The three of them glance between one another, their expressions uncomfortably pulled into a wide and tall. So you're dating again? Baxter, however, needed no interlude for his response. It came without hesitation. Excellent deduction, Terry. That is correct. Cove apes like one of his beloved fish. If he hadn't been sitting down, he would have fallen over, almost similar to a fish having to navigate on dry land. You're dating Baxter again? This is giving you flashbacks to the last time you told people you started dating Mr. Ward. No one seemed to quite believe it. Why? Baxter was so wonderful. He had some questionable qualities, sure, but that didn't change his incredible appeal. That was a hill you'd die on. Yes, I...
Is that all right?
Are you both sure about that? Both, she said. That was not what she meant. Based on Miranda's wary side glance, the question was aimed right at you. It was a valid concern. You'd been hurt by him before. Yep, positive. We know a real lasting relationship won't walk down the shore, but we're going to make it work. And congratulations. That's amazing. Cove looks a little sad. Miranda beat all the others to the punch in terms of showing excitement. However, she wasn't the last. Terry literally bopped you and Baxter on the arms and cheered.
Finally!
Welcome back for good, B-Man. You're never gonna get rid of us now. Baxter rubbed small circles into where he'd been struck. The nudge couldn't possibly have hurt. You felt how harmless it was. Maybe he was worried about wrinkles.
Thank you.
I think that warming applies more to the rest of you about me. I'm not leaving, no matter how many seasons come and go, but thank you. Cove's distinctive blurry brow stayed pinched. To say he doubted that would be an ocean-sized understatement. He did manage to smile for you. Not the sunny, shiny beam of joy you'd loved to see, but it was a sort of soft, I'm here for you look. Don't be terrible, okay? I want Luna to be happy.
I appreciate the understanding.
Of course, I appreciate your openness to the idea. Well, that was still a work in progress, clearly. You weren't worried. Cove had struggled to talk to Baxter even before he vanished for half a decade. You could give him a time to get used to it. Both those men were going to be a big part of your life going forward. At least Cove was willing to be civil. Your friends accepted your judgment and your new boyfriend, and was to celebrate. Thanks, I knew you'd get it. It was a good time to mention the next level piece of news too. Also, I'm gonna be staying with Baxter for a while. Baxter laughed at your direct explanation. He placed a hand on his head and nodded calmly.
Yes.
That's right. I invited Luna to be a guest at my apartment since Jude and Scott have left on their honeymoon. That way, they don't have to be there alone during the rest of their stay in the area. Also, because I simply enjoy having their company.
Sorry.
Already with that? Terry cracked a smile and Miranda gave a nudging elbow she needed to get a look at this. Then he whistled. I don't know how he does it, but the man has done it. He whistled louder this time, and Miranda slapped a hand across her mouth. She spun away from the group. It was obvious by the way her shoulders were shaking that she was laughing. But really, how did you do it?
To be honest,
I'm not quite sure how either, though I imagine it has to do with Luna's generosity and kindness than any quality I possess. Terry and Miranda exchanged a silent grin with one another and then shared it with you. Somehow you managed to defy the odds. It was a marvel to everyone standing there that everything had worked out. Working as a team, those left in the venue carried piles of boxes and bags into the elevator in Terry's van. It took a few trips, a couple of high fives, one dive for the elevator doors, and many silly compliments, and it was done. Then came the final puzzle, fitting it onto the vehicle. After some creative arrangements work inside the trunk, what remained of the wedding had been safely packed away. Together with Terry and Cove, you squished the trunk door shut and pressed. When you heard it click into position, the three of you slumped forward and sighed wearily. Terry spun on his heels and whipped his forehead with another of his exaggerated displays of exhaustion. Phew, another successful party in the bag. Terry moved to Miranda's side and hooked his arm around her shoulders. He playfully pulled her in close.